Harry here to talk about what's becoming something of a media blitz, at least relative to the very restrained rules of decorum that normally govern the Supreme Court by the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts. Now, we had at the time when Judge Boasberg issued opinion that went against the administration. Nobody in Congress knew anything about it, but it didn't stop 7 of them from calling for the impeachment. You had Roberts jumping, almost certainly with the approval of at least 5 members of the court, jumping into the fray to say, this is not the way you handle disagreement with the court. This is what appeals are for. You don't call for impeachment. That's true both as a sort of matter of accepted norms in the country. Impeachment is not for disagreement with legal analysis, but also, a broader matter of stability of the whole court system. So that was really unusual, as I said at the time. The Chief Justice normally speaks only in very established official settings. That would be opinions, of course, and then certain testimony in front of Congress. He then recently, he made an appearance in front of the ABA. That's also, not out of line, but during that time, he had the same refrain about, if you disagree with judges, it's dangerous to call for their impeachment. And what you need to do is take an appeal, etc. So the same message, but he used his time at the ABA to say it. He knew it would get big press coverage, and it did. That was just a couple days ago. There have been other things we've talked about. I'll maybe summarize them in a bit by Sotomayor and Jackson. But then we have now the sort of latest, another appearance and another statement. First, it's at Georgetown Law. It's not exactly out of line for him to be there and talking about judicial matters, but you have to imagine, he wouldn't normally jump to do it. He did it, so that was sort of noteworthy. But by far, to me, the most noteworthy and really the thing that stands out about all of this is he said, it's just a little statement, but we're talking about, as against the general backdrop of saying nothing and being completely passive, the rule of law is endangered. The rule of law is endangered. That's really a significant, to me, giant step above warning about trashing judges. Whose opinions you don't agree with, or calling for their impeachment. Now, look, you can make an overall argument that why don't you want to call for impeachment? Well, if you really work that through, that erodes the credibility of the courts, and that's a real sort of important concomitant of the authority of the courts, who, after all, lack both the purse as Congress or the sword, the executive. All that's true. So you could make an argument teasing it out. Maybe he's even thought this through, that it's not going any farther, but it is. To say the rule of law is endangered is to acknowledge the 900-pound, is it gorilla or elephant? I'll go with gorilla since we're talking about Donald Trump in the room. Because the endangerment to the rule of law is more than just insulting judges. That happens throughout history. It's improper to call for their impeachment, yes. But it's really all the saber rattling by Trump and company suggesting that the court could issue certain rulings. This is especially so in the immigration area, that they would simply, with the administration, ignore. At that point, the rule of law is in, under terrible stress and threat, and depending on what ensues, that really could be the end of the rule of law in American society. And Roberts takes another step, which he says, the notion that the rule of law governs, that's the basic proposition. That's the basic proposition here. So that's more than you would say about why you shouldn't insult judges. And then he says, that's true as a matter of theory, but also as a matter of practice. We need to stop and reflect every now and then how rare that is, certainly rare throughout history and rare in the world today. That to me is plainly a kind of overall sounding of an alarm that we are looking at losing the, one of the, 2, 3 core propositions of constitutional democracy and rule of law, namely the courts make decisions and the executive obeys them. And of course, Congress plays its delineated constitutional role, which it seems not to be happening here at all. But those, to me, have an element of sobriety and candor that really go beyond the defending of judges. Don't try to call for their impeachment because you disagree with their opinions. You could call for their impeachment. It would, make things more solid, more kind of unhealthy, in the system. But when he goes through the rule of law as the basic point, it is endangered and it is really valuable, including in the world today. To me, that is looking right out at the, is it very close or medium range or whatever, but the real proposition. And he's speaking, I think, to the people here, which is something Chief Justices don't normally do, saying, man, oh man, take a look, America. Who else would he be talking to? It's the people who, and the academy and the legal institutions and the legal profession that need to stand up and say, no, 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 Donald Trump. These words by Roberts are not going to change what Trump does. They don't seem to be doing anything for Congress. He's not telling them to wake up. It really is basically a call to us to understand what Trump is flirting with and, across the board. And so that, to me, in the future, the American experiment will continue or it won't continue. Either way, and I've said for different reasons I think it will. But we'll look to a statement like that, to the Chief Justice of the United States saying the rule of law is endangered and making the point about why it matters so much and what is really so worrisome about this juncture, as part of a pushback generally toward Trump and his, constitutional and his authoritarian project of simply supplanting the Congress and the courts. So to me, it's all nuanced, but that's how the Supreme Court operates, saying the rule of law is endangered and giving the paean to the rule of law, why it's so important, at an address that he didn't have to give, but he went to from a man who we know chooses every word very carefully. I think that is a significant signpost of the overall concern within the judiciary, not just of judges being trashed, but literally of the threat to the rule of law presented by Donald Trump. Talk to you later. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this video and other Talking Feds content, please take a second to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.